So why I use 6 degrees of separation is I believe it puts students in control of the lesson and really allows teachers to get an accurate gauge of what students know and what they understand, and allows students the ability to communicate that, right? So 6 degrees of separation is fabulous both as a formative or summative strategy for teachers to be able to use in class. It allows teachers to be able to see, do the students understand the causation that is unfolded within a unit or throughout history? Do students identify and engage in that conversation over what has remained consistent throughout history and some of those trends that we can really find? Or what has changed, and then what caused that change, right? And being able to have students really delve into that for what has caused those monumental changes, be it in settlement patterns or whatever it may be. 6 degrees of separation for me was a great formative at the kickstart of any unit or topic of what do you know, right? I'm talking about here's an event from our last unit of study, and here's an event from the end of this next unit that we're about to study, and what do you know already? And being able to see, can they make some of those connections? So I really knew where I needed to dive deeper and which students I could, lean on to be able to have and involve in some of the conversation as we were going through units. It's an excellent review as well, both connecting the prior year to the subsequent year of history, world history and U.S. history, or just within semesters and time periods, and being able to connect those as you saw from the broad 6 degree of separation. But in the end, like I said, it's really about the student involvement for me and making sure that the students are thinking about history critically rather than just trying to memorize the events and the order in which they unfolded, because a lot of times students will find connections and pieces that books don't often talk about, right? And so really allowing them to engage in not only the investigation of history, but constructing their own knowledge and their own historical narrative, because that's really what they'll carry with them. And so when we start to look at 6 degrees of separation, there are a number of extension activities or ways that you can use 6 degrees of separation in class. So I'm going to go over these 4 a little bit more in depth for in-class reviews, small groups and partnering, in-class debates and discussions, for how 6 degrees of separation can be used. And I'm sure you probably already have a number of other different ways that have already popped into your head for how you could tailor it to your own use as well. So for the first one, I already said this a little bit, but using it as a bell ringer or an exit slip. If I've covered a really broad range of topics in a particular day, let's say we were talking about the Civil War or Reconstruction or something like that in class, having an exit slip at the end of the day where I give them the beginning and end event and see what's resonating with them most at that moment. And that way I know at the beginning of the following class what are some of the ones that maybe didn't stick with them as much to recover before beginning the next day. For the unit reviews, for the quarter and semester reviews, either doing the around the world, right, kind of poster things, or being able to then have them based off of the around the worlds, going to a particular poster and then picking 2 events and creating their own 6 degree of separation at each of those tables is a really nice way to be able to have students engage in that and then have students debate and discuss those. And then connecting courses together. For students who are taking some of the CIS or AP classes or any of those, really being able to enrich and dive more deeply and being able to connect the different areas of history together. For small group and partnering, there are some tricks that you can play on students with 6 degrees of separation. One of them is a class divided. What you're doing is you're creating a timeline and you're keeping the beginning or end event the same on both of the 6 degrees of separation, but you are changing the opposing one, right? So if I were to keep the first Thanksgiving in place on mine, but I were to put the end one at something like King Philip's War, okay? and then on the other one having it be the first Thanksgiving. My focus overall is still Native American history, and then I hand it out to the class, and half the class has one of them and half the class has the other 6 degree of separation. They don't know it yet, and then I have them get together and discuss. And they see, were there overlaps or were there others that did not overlap, right? And why did they have the differences that existed, and why the commonalities, for really getting at some of those huge landmark events within a particular area of history. Of course, just general partnering and being able to say, share yours, and being able to have them not only share it, but justify it when you have them say, come to a consensus between the two of you. And so taking your individual ones, pairing them together, and creating a new 6 degree of separation, and then sharing that out with the class. You can take it from the small group and make it full in class as well, where you take them from the think, pair, share, or take them from the partnering, and now say, okay, together as a class, we have to come to a full class consensus for what are our 4 events. And you will not believe how heated some of the kids can get with that, thinking that they are right and theirs has to stay. So you can have a lot of fun with that one, and really challenging the kids to engage in that. And then, of course, you can have kids engage in a more generalized fishbowl or just general discussion within class, right? What was the most important event that caused all of the other ones that were on your 6 degrees of separation, right? And then you can also have them talk about the continuity and change over time. Based off of your 6 degree of separation and all of the events that are there, what is still the same in society today? Why is it still the same in society today? What happened since the activities that you had listed on there that has caused for those things to stay the same, right? And then what has changed? And what happened since the activities listed on your 6 degrees of separation that has really encouraged that change and made that change happen in society? And then when we look at just other general tools that can be used, there are a couple of other really great resources that also focus on historical causation. They're not the 6 degrees of separation, but they still are really strong, and some of them are reading resources as well. So some activities that I've used in class have been taken from the Allen ISD website, and she's got it categorized into the historical thinking skills, which is really nice for historical causation and periodization as well. We also have Bruce Lesch's book, and it's Why Won't You Just Tell Us the Answer? If you have not read the book, I highly encourage you to make sure that you do read it. And so in there, he's got a number of different examples of lessons that can easily be implemented, focusing on the different historical thinking skills too. But his is very much about, I'm not here to tell you the answers. You're going to have to investigate, and you're going to have to find it. And so the quote there at the bottom of the screen is really in one of the examples that he gives for the rail strike of 1877. He tells the story, and then the kids have to research and try and dive into it. And he says, really, you're not going to have a riot unless there's a reason to have a riot. There has to be something that angers people to have them riot. And you're not going to need to ask for troops unless there's violence and rioting going on, right? And so really just encouraging kids that even in reading a story or a narrative, you can easily identify the chronology behind it, and then look at the causation. What is the root cause that leads to all of those other events? So a couple other really strong resources for historical thinking skills and lessons are just the Stanford Reading Like a Historian Project website, which has a number of different resources on there. And then we also have, like I said, Bruce Lesch's book, Why Won't You Just Tell Us the Answer? And on there, it'll begin by just telling you the general information of why teaching practices in history should be more investigative, and then providing some of those specific examples and lessons that can really enrich student learning. So that really concludes the 6 degrees of separation. I hope that you find it really, really helpful in being able to use and easy to implement within your class. If you have any feedback or questions for me, please feel free to contact me with the information there. And I'd like to give a very special thank you to Thomas Sleet for introducing me to this wonderful strategy, Forest Lake Area Schools, and the Minnesota Historical Society. So thank you so much and have a great evening.